G'day so-and-sos, welcome to my sewing room. My name's Cathy, this is Lucifer, and today we're going to talk about sewing machine needles. Now we're going to look at what the different needles do, how to pick the right needles for the project that you're doing, how to insert them correctly, and also a few tips on how to thread your needle if you're having a little bit of difficulty. Now, it is so important to pick the right needle for the right job. Not all needles are made equally. And if you try and use the wrong needle for the wrong project, then your machine's just going to jack up and give you a whole heap of trouble and you won't be able to figure out why. So let's get cracking. You might be looking at your fabric store or online and see that packets of needles have different names. And that sort of relates to the qualities of them. So a universal needle is typically good for any sort of cotton type fabric, nothing that's sort of too dense. And you can get away as a beginner with using a universal needle for all those sort of cotton type projects pretty easily without worrying too much about it. And then we have something like a ballpoint needle. And a ballpoint needle is designed for knit fabric, stretch fabric. So the tip of it is a little bit rounder. So instead of punching through all the fibers of your fabric, it sort of slips in between them. And that helps your knit fabric to stop from puckering and pulling and getting all distorted. So if you're using a stretch or a knit fabric, it's really important to use the correct needle, which will be a ballpoint needle. Or on the packet, it might even have written stretch fabric on there, which just makes life a lot easier. And then you have sharp needles, and they're just, what it says, they're just a little bit sharper. So they are good for using with cotton that is a little bit denser. So cotton woven, cotton duck, or even when, especially in bag making, like what I do, after you've interfaced your cotton and you just need that little bit more sharpness or punch power to get through without getting any skipped stitches. And then you have microtex needles. And microtex are more for those lighter fabrics, those sort of more delicate fabrics that, might get a little bit more of a pucker or a pull when you sew. So you want to make sure that you're using a microtex. Now, saying all that, then we have the weights of our needles. So it's important to pick the right type of needle, whether it's sharp, universal, ballpoint, or microtex. And then we need to pick the right weight. So weight just refers to pretty much how strong the needle is, the thickness of it. And you want obviously a lighter one for using lighter weight or more delicate fabrics. And then you want to go up in needle weight for using things like, multiple layers of heavy denim or vinyl or leather or anything like that. So when you need that little bit more punch power. Now, I'm in Australia, and in Australia, we go by the metric system. So the needles that I buy, I look at from 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, 110, and for my industrial, even up to 125. In America and Europe, you guys go by the other system, whatever it is. I suck at math. And you will go from, I think it's from 8 to 18, with 8 being the lowest and then, moving on up. Saying that though, most packets will have both on there. So let's have a look at that one. That is a Singer domestic machine packet of needles that I got from my sewing shop. And you'll see on there that it has 90, and then next to the 90, it has 14. And then I have 100, and then next to the 100 is 16. So that is really getting up there. The 100/16 is what you'd be using for multiple layers of vinyl or for leather or for anything like, really thick and a little bit harder to get through. So it's pretty easy to figure out no matter where you're buying them or whatever part of the world you are from. Now, what needles do you buy when you go to the fabric shop? How do you know they're going to fit your machine? Most domestic machines, if not all, have a flat back to the needle. So let me open this up and I'll show you what I mean. Now, hopefully you'll be able to see this on camera, and if not, when I'm editing, I'll find a better picture and pop it up on the screen. But if you have a look at that, you might be able to see that it has a flat back to it. And if you have a look at the needle that's in your machine, you'll be able to see it. So that flat back on a domestic needle means that you can only put it in your sewing machine one way. It'll only fit in one way. So you're pretty right to figure out how to put it in and which is the right way to put it in. And the top of the shaft generally will have a different color to it. So that one is bronze and blue. And then, oh yeah, they're all the same in there anyway. But they have like a different colored band on them. So these ones all have a blue band. Other ones might have a green band or a yellow band or an orange band. And your packet will tell you what weight, remember that weight, that 80, 90, 100, how strong the needle is. That band will correspond with what weight it is. So if you want to change out your needle and use something else, but that other one was still good, then you'll be able to look at it, go, well, that's got an orange band. I'll have a look at my packet. Orange means that it's whatever weight it is. So that's why different needles also have different colors. Now, these ones are Class, Klasse, and these are kind of like an all brand universal type needle. So they generally fit across most brand domestic sewing machines, and they're just a little bit cheaper sometimes. They go on sale, and these ones are all 90/14. And then I have my industrial sewing machines. So I use organ needles for my industrial sewing machine. And I think there's 10 in a packet, and I actually buy them in a big box. These ones are a 75. So in the industrials, they do go up by 5s as well. And these are the size of these, okay, and not size by weight. I don't mean that. I mean the class of needle. These are 1955. So 1955 needles will fit my Singer sewing machine. So I can get 80 weight in 1955 sizes. I can get 100 weight in 1955 sizes. So if you're buying an industrial machine, if you're looking at a secondhand one online that you might not have the manual or the specifics for, it's really important to find out what size, like what dimension that, that 1955, because it corresponds to the length of it as well. And if you get a needle that's too long in your machine and you're sewing and it hits your bobbin, you're going to get strikes, and eventually your needle will break if it doesn't break straight away. But if it doesn't break straight away, you're going to be getting strikes on your bobbin in your bobbin case, and that's just not good for your machine. Your project won't look good. It's just, yeah, don't do it. So the most important thing is read your manual. If you have a manual, read your manual. If you're buying a second-hand machine and it doesn't come with a manual, download it. Now I'll show you how to use the automatic threader on my Singer C430 domestic machine. Now, it doesn't matter if you don't have this particular machine because all these automatic threaders are set up pretty much the same. Now, this shot is a little bit darker, and that's because I have turned my machine off. You always want to make sure your machine is off before you put your fingers anywhere near your needle, because the one time that you don't will be the one time that something happens. So I'm going to make sure that my thread is behind that little bit there that it's meant to go in, like that. And then there's this hook here. I'm going to make sure that my thread is underneath that hook. Then I have this lever, going to pull that down and all the way down. And when I do that all the way down, then this little part here wraps around my needle. this part here will wrap around my needle, and it's got a little groove in it where I want to put my thread. So I'll put my thread back underneath that hook, hold it nice and tight, push that lever all the way down, and then let it click over. Then I'll pull my thread across so it is through those two little hooks. Now it's really important to make sure that you put it under that first little hook. Otherwise this just gets really difficult. Now I'm going to let go of this lever, but I'm going to do it quickly. If I don't do it quickly, and if I don't release the thread from this hand at the same time, it won't work. And then it is through. If you go slow when you do that, it doesn't work. That's when you run into trouble. You want to make sure that there's no loops, like it's not twisted around your needle anywhere, but that's looking pretty good. So if your machine doesn't have an automatic threader, or you just simply don't like it, here's a couple of tips that will help you thread your needle manually. Now, I'm sure that we've all done it at some stage or another where we've taken the thread and popped it in our mouth and just wet the tip a little bit before we've put it through the needle. What I prefer to do is to start off with a nice clean edge on my thread. And rather than putting that in my mouth, I'm actually going to wipe my finger on the back of the needle with a little bit of moisture. Now, it's up to you. If you want to be a bogan like me, you can lick your finger and moisten the back of your needle. Or if you don't want to be a bogan, then just dip your finger in a little bit of water. Then I'm going to get myself a piece of white paper so that I can see the whole of the needle a little bit better, because I am blind as a bat. Now this makes a world of difference. From here to here just makes life so much easier, especially when you don't have the light on your machine because your machine is turned off. And then I can get that through a lot easier. So how often should we be changing our needle? Now, typically I will change it out per project. So if I'm making a bag, that might be, say, between 6 and 8 hours, 10 hours, that type of thing. But I use different needles during a project for different things. So I might have a light needle and a heavier needle, and I change them up depending on what part of the project I'm in. But generally around 8 hours for each needle. So if you know that your needle has been in there for 8 hours worth of sewing, then maybe it's time to change it out. Now, typically you will be able to tell when your needle needs to be changed once you get into the hang of it and once you learn how to recognize it. So there might be a dull thunking sound. And I see that all the time on sewing groups where people would be like, my machine just started making this noise, where it's a dull sort of thunking sound, hard to say with the lisp, a dull thunking sound as you sew. And that's because your needle is struggling to punch through the fabric. So time to go. If you are getting broken thread, if your thread is snapping and you can't figure out why, it could be because you have just a tiny little burr on the tip of your needle, and that's catching your thread and breaking it, and you don't want that either. But while we're on it, if you have accidentally had a needle strike on your needle plate and it's created a bit of a dent or a bit of a hole, there will be a sharp bit of metal, which is called a burr. So you might need to just sand that down or just buy yourself a new plate. Other things that might indicate that you need to change your needle out are if you're getting skipped stitches. So you might have 2 or 3 really nice stitches, and then you'll have one that's a bit longer where it's sort of missed one and just given you one long stitch. So if you're getting problems like that, change your needle. If you have threaded your machine a million times and it's just not working for you, and it's just bunching up and catching up on the bottom, change your needle and see if that makes a difference. Now, when you change your needle, you need to dispose of it properly. So I use an old spice jar, and because it's got the holes in the top, I use one with the holes on the top. Don't use one that's all open. I pop my needle in, and then I'll pop the lid on. Don't reuse them. There is no point. If you start to have that thunking noise or skip stitches or anything else, or it's been in your machine for 8 hours of use anyway, just get rid of it. It's no point. So I generally do that because rather than putting them in the bin, I don't want to put needles in the bin and then, Adrian comes in and cleans up my sewing room for me because, he does that, OCD, and he puts a heap of fabric in there and he goes to push it down in the bin and then gets a needle in his hand. You don't want to do that. You want to dispose of them safely, and you don't want to risk them going on the floor either. So if I'm doing a project and I'm using a light one and a heavy one, I will have a magnet plate that has a lid on it, a magnet case. And when I change them out, I'll pop it in there and put the lid on there because I just really don't want one through my fingers or my foot. I don't want Lucy Purr to find one on the floor and chew on it and get one through her mouth. So always be safe. Once that has a couple dozen needles in it, then I'll put packing tape over the top and then I'll pop it in the bin. So always dispose of them safely. Otherwise, get yourself a sharps container. If you are able to get one easily, then just get a sharps container sort of designed for those smaller ones and use that. Okay, guys, well, I hope that's given you a little bit more information on how to pick the right needle for the job, how to use them, how to thread them, and just have a bit of an easier time sewing. The more you learn, the easier it will be. Okay, guys, thanks for watching. If you liked my content, please like and subscribe. It really does help me out when you do that because it helps the YouTube algorithm promote my videos a little bit more, which, is only good for me and for you, I hope. Okay, have a good one. And remember, it's only fabric. We can always buy more. See ya. Bugger.